Hi there, I'm Bill Gallagher, host of the Scaling Up Business Podcast and a business growth coach. I want to talk to you today about the 5 biggest things that we see missing from companies and getting in the way of scaling up the business, right? About a week ago, a CEO came to me from a company that is in one of my workshop series, and he was looking for something more, something new, something more to get out of the rut. How many of you find yourself in a rut right now? You feel like you just can't figure out how and where to grow the business, right? I think most of us find ourselves in that place at some point or another. If not now, before too long you'll be there, right? I think it's pretty familiar for many of us, right? Before I tell you about what we did with him and what we found, let me though tell you about 2 other folks who used our framework with very different results. I recently interviewed both of these guys on our podcast, so there are full detailed stories of each of them. But the first is Darius Mirshahzadeh, who used our work and grew his business to over 800 in about 3 years, over 800 people in about 3 years, largely with a culture rooted in values and purpose and pushing towards a BHAG, right? So that's the first one, Darius Mirshahzadeh. The other guy, also using our framework, Tim Danley, rethought his whole business model and then used our framework to create a $200 million business with only 3 employees. So 2 really specific examples, and you can hear more about these guys using our framework, purpose, values, and BHAG to grow to significant businesses in just a few years' time. Now, these are not get-rich-quick schemes. These are not these are real businesses doing a real thing. One is a finance-related business, and the other has an eco and power solution treating wastewater. So, big deal, real businesses, right? So let's go back to the CEO who came to me from the workshop series feeling like he was in a rut. So he came to me and he shared about how he was struggling with something, he was looking for something new. And many people frequently are, and they're forgetting how important these core basic things are. So I asked him about his business, the situation he was in, and some of the core things we developed. First of all, purpose. Did he have a purpose for the business, the why of his work? Well, he did have something in that direction, but it was definitely a little weak, all right? The second thing, values. Now, he chuckled at this, as I chuckle now, and he said, well, he developed values for sure, but he couldn't remember any of them, right? So they weren't alive and real for him and the rest of the business, right? The third thing, BHAG, the big, hairy, audacious goal. He said that he'd thought about this, he'd heard me speaking about it many times, and he hadn't come up with one. So we've got no clear purpose, values you can't remember, and couldn't come up with a BHAG. Well, what about core customer? Who's your ideal customer profile? Well, he'd come up with 3 industries that they love to focus on and felt like they should do. That was their core customer. However, that's actually more like what we would call the sandbox, the industries and segments and geographic areas that we would play with, right? The channels and so on. But not a rich description of a core customer. And the 5th thing is brand promises. So what do they know that they could count on? He had a couple of things like this. They weren't clear, and these weren't stated from the perspective of a core customer. So they were just what they'd come up with on their own. So the big 5 things are purpose. That's the why of your work. It's motivating and inspiring. 2 are the values. That's how you operate. That's the how of the business. And it also affects who you work with, who you hire, and how you make decisions day to day. The BHAG is a goal. It creates a game to play. It's usually 10 or more years in the future. All right? Core customer is a rich description, and it tells you which customers to target and fight for, which ones to really keep, and which ones to pass on. The 5th thing are brand promises. What do you offer that your core customer wants, and can you state those top 3 things very clearly across the whole company so that the brand promises what you offer speaks directly to the core customer on a consistent and clear basis, all right? From these 5 big things, we can create 3-year targets, annual goals, and even plan out in detail the next quarter. We can also begin to develop accelerators, things like words you own, that help you target online and define your business, and creating even a tenfold advantage over your competition with things like X Factor. So I want to tell you about how to do these things in just a minute, but first I want to let you know about the 3 things that we've got on our website and that we offer. First of all is the podcast. I suggest you get over to iTunes or wherever you subscribe to podcasts and subscribe to our podcast. We do a new one every week. They're about 30 minutes in length, and you can subscribe and listen on your way to work or wherever you listen to your podcasts. Give you a shot in the arm of good business ideas every week. That's the podcast. Second thing is a growth kit. We've got a kit that has an overview of scaling up the whole framework and specific instructions on how to begin to do strategy and planning sessions with your leadership team without even having a coach. So, place to start there. And the third thing is one of our live in-person workshops. So we do live in-person workshops just a couple times a year, and I'm sure we've got one coming up soon, but again, just a couple times a year, and you can find the dates and the registration link for that on our website. All of those things you'll find at scalingupbusiness.com. Scalingupbusiness.com will have all that stuff, and the first 2 things, the growth kit and the podcast, are totally free. And then the workshop, there's a small fee for attending the workshops. All right. Now, back to the big 5. So how do you develop and deploy these big 5 things? First of all, purpose. Purpose is the difference you're making in the world. It's what difference you're making. It's your benefiting the world. So, I just want you to know, though, that it's not some airy-fairy kind of thing. It's not turning every business into a nonprofit, but every business does something that people really love and value. So if you're a staffing company, it could be keeping the world working, or if you're building homes, it could be giving people their dream home. Or if you're a food distributor, it could be creating happiness with foods people really love. So there could be any number of things that have to do with the pursuit of beauty, or making a real difference, or knowledge, or happiness, and like that. So there's all kinds of purposes. That's the difference. And we just ask ourselves, what difference does our business make? And we pull those things together. So first of all, that's purpose. It's the why of your work, and it's deeply motivating and inspiring to both you, the employees that you work with, and so on. So just take some time to develop it. We do have videos on many of these things that go into them at even greater length on our website. All right, second thing is values. Values are not generic, and they're not aspirational. So we don't want words on the wall like integrity, teamwork, communication, right? Excellence. Those are not values. They make no difference, and we can make fun of them. In fact, companies, even notorious companies like Enron, had values, and one of Enron's values was integrity. So clearly they have a very different definition of integrity than probably you and I do. All right. So we want to determine the values, and we just do an exploration and inquiry. The lesson or the exercise we use is the Mission to Mars exercise from Jim Collins, and you'll also find it in the Scaling Up book. So we're just going to begin to ask, who really represents the company and what are their characteristics? And then we're going to roll those up into 5 big things. I really don't like to see 6 if you have to. You could even have as few as 4, but we want to have 4 or 5 big things that are richly described that characterize you, right? So one of ours is humor, right? That's not on many companies' values, but I like to have a good time, like to laugh, and so on. So that's part of one of ours. So what are yours? That's the inquiry to do. All right, the third thing then is the BHAG. BHAG is the 10-year goal that inspires you and challenges you, and we want to express that BHAG in purpose. Now, if you've got a BHAG that's like $100 million or $50 million or even $10 million, and that's your goal to get to, all we need to do with a BHAG like that is translate it into purpose. So, let's say I'm a home builder, and let's say my goal is $100 million in 10 years, and that's the thing that really inspires me and lights me up, and I can talk to my spouse about. So if I translate that into purpose, and what we do is give families their dream home and a great life, then I would just want to consider at $100 million and building up to that over 10 years, how many homes am I going to build? I'm going to come up with probably thousands and thousands of homes, and I could translate that. I could either use the number of, 100,000 homes, or I could translate that into something like a community the size of whatever. And I could name that community and create a rich picture that the whole company can engage with. Even our suppliers and customers would be inspired by what we're up to in the BHAG. All right, so purpose, values, BHAG, big, hairy, audacious goal. That's the third thing. The fourth thing is core customer. So we want to come up with the attributes and qualities, not merely demographic type characteristics for the core customer. So I could tell you the number of leaders that we like to in the geographic area, and I could talk to you about some industries that we have some experience in. And that wouldn't be what I'm talking about with core customer. So even the revenue size, that's not where we're going. Those things matter. They're interesting. We do use them. We do see them. But far more important to me is that a company and a CEO is really hungry, really reaching for growth. So that's my number one characteristic, hungry and reaching for growth. The second thing is that they're coachable. They're really open to coaching and trying new things. They just don't know everything already. And the third thing is that they have a real sense of humor and they're a fit for our personality, because so much of my work is determined by my particular personality. I'm irreverent, I'm informal, I'm a California guy, and that just doesn't work for everyone, right? So those are my big three characteristics, and then I have all those other facts. So what are yours? If you look at the people that you really love working with, why? And then think about the people you really hate working with, and why do you hate working with them? If you take the things about them that you hated working with and take the opposite of that, plus the things you love about the customers you really love, between the two of those things, you'll come up with a rich set of words, and you can distill them down into 3 to 5 things that really define your core customer in a rich descriptive fashion that's qualitative in nature. All right, now the brand promises. So what can your core customer count on from you? What are you known for? What are you really good at? Well, for this, we can begin with your own speculation, but then we want to add to that what your customers say. So I like to ask the core customers, a handful of people, these 3 questions. Why did you choose us initially? When you first began to work with us, why did you do that? So that's the first question. Second question is, now that you've been working with us for a while, what are we good at? What do you say that we're really good at? And the third thing is, what's different, weird, unusual, or even annoying about us? So, why did you choose us? What are we good at? And what's different, weird, unusual about us? If we ask those 3 things from a range of customers, we can then pull that stuff together, distill it down into the top 3 things. The first thing is most important. So I know for us that having the best framework in the world for scaling up a mid-market company, that's the framework from Scaling Up and the Rockefeller Habits, that's the number one thing people count on. They also count on my skill as a coach, as a facilitator, and workshop leader. So I can lead the team through both teaching, coaching, and doing all of that at a very high and consistently predictable level. And the third thing is, I bring a lot of personality to it, right? So those are my brand promises, and that's what my core customers have told me they value and appreciate and they note in our work. All right, so that's how you get the big 5. Now, once you've gotten these things, you want to use them. You want to use them extensively. Infuse them widely into your meetings and your culture. Bring them into your marketing, use them in evaluating and hiring your people, use them in all of your operations, and keep reviewing and honing these things quarterly. This is not a one and done exercise if you really want to scale up. You're going to have to review this on a very regular basis and keep improving it. All right, that's it. Thanks for listening and for letting me contribute to your growth. I'm Bill Gallagher, growth coach and host of the Scaling Up Business Podcast.